Hello, Rusty Schaefer.
Hello, Wade Jersey.
We're starting this Joe Rogan style. We're just going to jump right in here. We'll get to your background and we'll get to the fun stories here as we go.
Great topic. It's going to be a great topic.
Yeah, it is going to be a great topic. Can't thank you enough for joining. I do have to say a brief thing, and I'm going to keep it to 30 seconds or less. In being on this podcast and now video podcast for almost a year on the video side and longer on the audio, I've been begging for somebody to get on this thing and talk to me. But most people freak out. And so the story for those that have been watching and listening for a long time is Rusty and I met at a hotel bar, basically having dinner next to one another. And he said, I ain't afraid of no camera, and I ain't afraid of no drink, and I ain't afraid of no conversation. And he happens to be a lawyer, and I had this idea in mind for this podcast. So welcome, Rusty. It's awesome to see you again. I haven't seen you since the show. Or was it a great show for me?
We haven't talked, man. I had such a great time meeting you and talking with you, and then I know we got busy, but here we are.
Yeah, it's awesome. So as I mentioned, Rusty's a lawyer, and so another brief thing for those that are new to the podcast or those that Rusty's going to send this to and they can watch and listen themselves. This is all about my sort of midlife, going through an empty nest scenario, all the pressures of life and all that implies, both from a social perspective, friend group perspective, work perspective, societal perspective. And as I've gone on and ranting into the microphone and camera for now almost 2 years, it's evolved into a conversation that touches on politics and how that impacts our lives. And it touches a lot on AI and how it touches our lives. Those two subjects became really front and center to all of those pressure points that were coming at me. And so you kind of focus where, the attention needs to be given. And so that's what we've been doing on this series. And so I keep bouncing back and forth between the two. This one specifically on how AI meets the law. And I'm glad you thought it was a thought-provoking conversation to be had. So give me your initial thoughts. And by the way, this is important to listeners because people like to know that this isn't staged. Folks, this isn't staged. I actually hit record as soon as we got our audio issues worked out and said, hello, Rusty. So here we go. But I'd love to hear your intro, your thoughts, what you've been thinking about since I sent you the outline, and go wherever you want.
Yeah, so this it's amazing, and that's why this is really cool, because I didn't know what you were going to send me, right? If you remember at the bar, we were talking football.
Some of it.
We were talking all kinds of stuff. But what's amazing? So I'll just give a quick 60 seconds on my background.
Keep going. Take longer.
I've done a lot in my life. I'm 62 years old. The only thing that I'm probably not as good as you at is golf, and that pisses me off because I'm trying to get better. But that's a whole nother podcast.
Okay, we'll do that one next.
Let's go back. I've got my undergrad from Connecticut, University of Connecticut, in economics and mechanical engineering. I've got a law degree, although I went back to law school at age 35. I invented the Fretlight guitar, F-R-E-T-L-I-G-H-T. It is a guitar that has lights in the neck. That is a real guitar that shows you where to put your fingers to play chords, scales, songs, and so forth. Right. So this right there ought to tell you a little bit about me. I am impatient, naturally, by design, by birth. I'm impatient, and I tried to learn guitar the right way. I took about 30 seconds looking at a book full of dots to memorize a scale, and I said, there has got to be a better way. That was 1989. 1989.
Wow,
right?
That's
no
awesome.
Internet, yellow pages. I mean, anyways, that story goes on. So I had a.
Oh, no, let's not go too far too fast, because that is a very valid point. So I was in college at the time. You're a few years older than me, not a lot, but I was in college at the time, and I remember that everything was so manual back then. As we look back on it, my first job in 1992, we didn't even have computers on the desk at the time I joined. So just to give people a reference, right, of what the technologies were at the time. Mobile phones had yet to been thought of, really. I mean, there were some doctors maybe carrying them around in '89,
Yeah.
but they were giant bags, like a suitcase with a phone hanging out of it. So okay, great. So you're looking at a book. I've seen the fret charts, trying to figure out what your chords were going to be. That's about as far as I go.
And
My son's got a guitar.
The analogy that I used for decades was look down right now. Anybody who's watching this, unless you're watching it on the phone, you see your computer keyboard, right? Where did they put the letters and numbers? Did they put them on a piece of paper to the side of the keyboard? No, idiots. They put them right on the stupid keys because we're idiots. So it made sense to me to put those dots in the form of lights, right? Under, flush mounted in the fretboard. So here's, I'll give you one more story and then we'll keep marching forward. When I developed the prototype, right? I mean, again, I didn't know crap about making a circuit board, and I put this in a guitar and all this kind of stuff. And again, I'm using the yellow pages, and I know people are going, "What are the yellow pages?" Well, it was a phone book, right? I didn't have Google to look up anything local, so I get a prototype made. And remember, 1989. The guitar plugs into the wall, okay, into an outlet. And there's 3 knobs. You dial up what key you want. I want the key of A. I want a major chord. Okay. There's all the A, C sharps, and E's that are on the fretboard. So I take that, and I had no desire to be a CEO. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't go to business school. I'm whatever. And I'm playing guitar, but I'm sitting there saying, okay, maybe I should go down and show this to Fender Guitars in LA. Right? And I mean, they'll buy it. And I said, I'm a holdout for the case of beer. But maybe, I don't know, what would they give me? $10,000 was a huge amount, right? I was just out of college. So, I mean, money was tight. I had a job at United Technologies as a mechanical engineer. And I mean, I was getting paid all $30,000 a year or something. So it was 1989. So I fly down, I don't know how I got this meeting, but I get a meeting with the VP of manufacturing, right? I fly down to LA. Okay, I fly down to LA. I take this guitar. I'm in their offices. This guy brings another couple guys in. I'm showing them this, and they're looking and they're hemming and they're hawing, and they punch into their calculator. Does everybody remember what a calculator is? Right? He punches in and he goes, "It's just not going to work for us. It's going to add $42 to retail."
That's a little bit of a short-sighted answer.
Right. Well, so that was the last answer I expected, right? So I'm like, I go, and it just, so now I'm like, oh, come on, these guys are not thinking. So I said, listen, do you guys know that guy up where I live? I lived in San Jose, California at the time. I said, the guy in Cupertino running Apple, Steve Jobs, right? Have you
heard of him? Yeah.
Have you seen the Apple Macintosh? Someday, one of these is going to be on everybody's desk, this or PC, right? It's a computer. And he's talking about songs on their music. It's going to, someday the guitar will interface with that and light up songs, etc. This is 1989. And they looked at me and they kind of backed up like I was like mentally imbalanced. And they just went, no, there's the exit. And
really?
That was it. So I'm flying back to San Jose, and I'm dejected as hell. I think I'm 26 years old or something, 25. I don't know what I was.
It's groundbreaking, though, at the time.
well, so I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at the time. I'm flying back what's called a Musician's Friend catalog. So Musician's Friend is a retail outlet, and I'm looking at their catalog, paper catalog. I'm flipping through it, and I see the new 1990 Fender vintage guitar, and I'm reading the description, right? And in the description it says, we took so much care making this guitar that we even pre-rusted the screws in a coffee can out back of the factory. And I'm thinking to myself, you guys are going the wrong way and I'm going this way. And you know what? I'll go do it myself. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up raising money and doing the whole entrepreneur thing. And I spent, 30 years, not all contiguous, but I spent 30 years running this company, building it, growing it, eventually selling it, and that part of the story is there.
Was it so? Okay, so but give us a sense. Give everyone a sense. So was it a success story over those 30 years? And
I would say it was a semi success. So it was a success from the standpoint of the product. We sold tens of thousands of guitars, and again, along the way, they started to connect to PC with Windows 95. We started to connect things digitally, and I think, and I've heard from many customers that we've affected their lives. I learned to play guitar because of you. I didn't think I could ever do it, or had I didn't have the time, but now with this, I did. So that was very gratifying for me as an inventor. Very gratifying. Monetarily, I certainly was able to pay myself and support my family when I sold the majority stake of this company in 2010. I got a bigger salary, but the music industry right before COVID, believe it or not, got tough. Again, remember, I was the only one trying to shortcut the process of learning. And what was happening in our world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do everything faster, learn a language faster. I can write a book faster. I can, edit a video faster. Everything was happening faster, except the big companies jumping in and saying, learn guitar faster. That was just not a thing. And so guitar and the selling of musical instruments, specifically guitar, really took a downturn in like 2017 on to 2020 until COVID, when people had time. People were stuck inside. Well, shit, what am I gonna? I might as well learn the damn guitar.
Right.
Of course, they still learn unless you had a fretlight traditionally, just like you did in 1950. So, anyways.
So fretlight is an attachment to an existing guitar, or is it manufacturer dependent? So obviously,
the company still exists. I left in 2019. By that time, I had negotiated song deals with Universal and Sony to have songs light up. We had an app. In fact, there's apps that connect to the guitar, all that kind of fun stuff. But I was just a little burnt out. I was kind of like, I've done all I can on the product side. And I made some decent money in not only the sale, but in salary. And I saw some great results from just having a damn idea in my head. And I was pretty happy, and it was time to leave. So I left in 2019.
Wow. Well, on the subject of making things happen faster is a perfect segue into our discussion topic here today, because that's what AI is bringing everything at us at a lightning speed, and there's going to be a massive adjustment. And as I've said on this show many times, we don't know. No one has a crystal ball to know exactly what the impact's going to be or when on each of these industries. But those that are heavily dependent upon research and retrieval of existing information are going to be one of the, call it low-hanging fruit, or one of the early disrupted industries, because AI can get to that information so much faster and accurately.
Yeah. So in that vein, just let me very quickly say I went back to law school in 2000. So again, there was a 3-year hiatus from doing fretboard, in 2000. But I went back to law school, got my law degree from Northeastern University in Boston, and I got hired by a firm called Nutter, McLennan and Fish in Boston, which still exists, a big law firm doing intellectual property stuff.
Okay.
So all of that. At the time that I went to law school, again, this was 2000, right? 2000 to 2003. I would say out of, like, when I started in 2000, maybe there's, call it 60 kids in a class, my property class. Maybe 5 were taking notes on computers. The rest of us were using paper. By 2003, that probably flipped. to
Mhm.
about 30% using paper and maybe 60, 70% using computers. So again, all during this time, stuff is moving forward. Now, when I was practicing law, the way you did research was you went out to there's two big disseminators of research, Westlaw and NexusLexis, and you look up cases, and you have to read them, and you have to disseminate whether this is good law, has it been superseded, what's the case before it, is there a case after it, all that kind of. It was hours and hours and hours of research. ChatGPT, of course, has changed things, but even more than that, I don't know if you're familiar with Grok. Have you heard about Grok?
I've barely even opened ChatGPT in the last 3 weeks as a result of Grok 3 is unbelievable.
Grok.com is 10x ChatGPT.
It is.
It is like talking to a human, and the interaction is absolutely amazing. So the big answer is absolutely. You're so correct. AI is going to change all of this manual stuff, from data retrieval to summarizing to even opinion, right? Because a summary might not be an opinion; it might just be summarizing the facts, and then it can give you an opinion. Now, the big knock on ChatGPT a year or two ago was that lawyers were relying on it, and they were walking into court going, "Yeah, the case of Smith versus Jones," and they'd find out there was no Smith versus Jones, right?
Hallucinations, yeah.
So
Yeah.
AI, from my understanding, has got this weird thing where it can conclude things and it can start searching, but something happens in between where it knows it's got to get to some kind of conclusion, and apparently it's called ghosting. I think it makes up information, or can.
It's called hallucination.
Oh,
And
that's
so-
a hallucination. That's
and,
right.
and that is it was one of the early knocks on AI, but it's going away because
Right.
tools like Perplexity and Grok 3 now are forced to do citation to note where they got the information versus assumed the information between the beginning and the end. Now, you got to understand, most of the time, you read the beginning of a chapter and the end of a chapter of a book, you can probably fill in the most of it, what happened in between yourself, right? Read the first two paragraphs, the last two paragraphs. So it was still incredibly powerful and accurate in most cases. Law would be an outlier there, right? Because there's so much detail that has to be found throughout. You can't just make assumptions on that case study from the beginning to the end or in between.
Right. See that, and that's where the rub is, right? Especially in this topic, because it's not like you can be an attorney. You are a practicing attorney in a jurisdiction, right, representing a client, and you get something wrong either in a motion filing or in court, you can be held liable. Not criminally, but civilly liable. So your client can sue you saying you effed up, right?
Yeah.
And that's the big difference from the rest of us making small mistakes or trusting AI and saying, "Oh well, it was generally right."
Yeah. So I'm going to make an observation here, and it's not meant to because I have good friends that are lawyers. Yourself included, but I'm going to say this because I visited with them in my journey in learning AI now for almost 3 years, and being as what I consider on the leading edge of understanding what's going on and how it's going to impact industries. And I think there was an assumption until very recently. There was an assumption that, well, AI can be really smart, but it can't be as smart as me. An attorney saying that, right? Or there's just certain components of it that will never play into law because this, and this. And then I had a conversation with one of my golf buddies, and he's a trial lawyer, and he said, I can see a day, and this is him, and he's not even up to speed on AI to near the extent, but he was extrapolating what he knew was going on with AI. He said, I can foresee a day when there's 3 laptops in the courtroom. One's the plaintiff, one's the defendant, and one's the judge. Because that's literally the reality. And if your point is that if we can get to the point where there's an opinion being made as a result, oftentimes that could be the role of the judge. So here's how I want to kind of break this down, if you don't mind. I see it playing out in almost phases, but I want to talk about what happens. So to me, all right, I'm a consumer of, or friends of mine are lawyers, and I'm around it. And one of my lawyer buddies would always say, the law is loosely based on logic. It was one of his jokes, and so you kind of look at things that way. And I thought, well, what is going to play out here when high dollar law firms, because I think the assumption from a consumer perspective, and I want you to jump in and tell me if I'm off base on this. I think the assumption from a consumer perspective is the higher the price you pay for the lawyer, the better representation you get. And I'm talking about in a defendant's case. Is that generally true? Am I interpreting that correctly?
I would say that is generally sort of the preconceived notion, right? It's kind of like the higher dollar amount the car, the better the car music.
Right.
Same kind of thing. And again, most of that comes from people either who haven't had familiarity with the law or lawyers, and so, but it's still out there.
So then that brings into play, well, why are they charging more? Is it the lead attorney? Is it the what? You're laughing already. So okay, what justifies, in my view, as again a consumer of potential law services, I would interpret the higher price meaning the lead guy, whoever is going to either defend me or prosecute on my behalf or whatever, is not only is he the best, but his team and his depth and width in understanding this type of law is all intact.
I would say that there's some truth to that. I'm not going to say that it's 100% true, right? Just because a lawyer is more expensive doesn't guarantee you that he and his team are the smartest on the block. Okay, that's number one. Number two, like any industry, these guys have a standard of living. They have maybe a big building, right? They do have an extensive team. Well, they've got costs, right? They're running the business of a law firm.
Right.
Partly you're paying for the Tesla. You're paying for the fish tank.
Right.
You are. Now, I can't tell you what percentage you're paying of that. Is a $200 an hour lawyer better than a public defendant? I mean, a lot of this is judgmental, and that's why a lot of lawyers will consult for an hour for free, right? Because they need to get across the point. Hey, it's not just my fancy offices, my suit, and my team. It's my experience and my knowledge, and I have to demonstrate that before you pay a dime, or they should.
Yeah. So, and that's where I'm apologizing to paint with a broad brush when I say those things. But the reality is, you hit on it. You just hit on it because outside of my friends that are lawyers, my wife and I watch a tremendous amount of legal dramas. And I know legal dramas are to a lawyer just as equally repulsive as medical dramas are to a doctor or an ER surgeon, because they're so off base and they're so written wrong and they misuse the law and they misstate that. But the one common thing, the one common theme in any law drama is that the public defender is probably not the best lawyer because he's got too much caseload. He doesn't have near the amount of support staff, and he's short on time, and he's green, and all of these things. So that's where let's inspect that, because that's the difference, right? So if the public defender with a pretty sharp young law clerk that knows how to use Grok and knows how to say, I don't want any opinion. You train the AI to say, I don't want opinion. I only want cited case logs, and I want the supporting documentation behind that, and they can assimilate that amount of information that takes that high-priced law firm weeks to do because of the staff they have, and they're looking up all those things manually. Aren't we leveling? I'm not saying we're getting to a level playing field. Aren't we leveling the playing field?
Well, we are, but it's happening on both sides. So you just mentioned one side. So one side, meaning that the green public defender now really does have this insane team called Grok or ChatGPT on his side. So what does the high-priced lawyer have to do? The high-priced lawyer is going to have the same access to Grok or ChatGPT. They're going to have to look at their team and say, I don't need you and I don't need you. Start using Grok. And so they're going to have to start to reduce costs. Now, they'll start with their team. They may even start with their building. Their hourly rate will probably be the last to go, but at some point they're going to have to. They're going to have to.
Yeah. So let's leave the have to, because that's really the I want to get into the financial thing, but let's divert where you just led us there, which is this overall common theme amongst those that some that are following AI, but mostly those that are afraid of AI are really of the mindset that AI is going to take their job. And as I've said on this program many, many times, and it's now almost become cliched in the AI world, is AI is not going to take your job, but some person who knows how to use AI is going to damn well take your job. So that's where the youngsters try and make their way up. And a good friend of mine for 20 plus years, his daughter just graduated from law school. And I've told him, I'm like, I don't know her business. I'm not going to say that I do. And I don't know anything about the firm that she just joined, but I do know this. There will be somebody or some folks within that law firm that will get ahead of the curve when it comes to using AI, and they'll separate themselves. And so when it comes to what you just said, human being reduction of force, they'll be the last ones to go. They may even be the ones to go at some point too.
Yeah, here's so where we are today with Grok and Chat GPT. The difference right now is that I can ask Grok. Let's say I'm in a litigation and I wanted to. I'm debating whether to file a certain motion. Okay. I could ask Grok. I could get all the research. Of course, that's easy. But I could ask Grok, hey, should I file this motion? Grok and these from my use of these so far, they're not gonna sit there and do like a human does. Oh, look, here are the arguments. Do my opinion, you should do this. They're not gonna do that. They give you an even-handed. Well, on one hand, if you did, you could do this, or on the other hand, you could do that. It doesn't really answer the human question of should I. They're not there yet. They're not. They haven't taken a stand. I've been on Grok with different things and disagreed with Grok, and they go, "Oh, good point. Well, let's think about that and go the other way." It's like, well, great. Are you that easy to persuade?
Right.
So right. This is where, and again, I feel bad for young lawyers. You kind of said it because they don't have the experience yet. But older lawyers still have so much experience that kind of strategy, that kind of going against maybe what 5 other lawyers would do, the wild card strategy, right? That could make the difference in the case. And that's not going to happen from AI. Certainly not today.
Well, and your experience with Grok mirrors mine very accurately. It's very much an attaboy type response that you get, right? You don't get a whole bunch of contra or argumentative tone or it says, hey, if it was my money, I wouldn't do that, right? I wouldn't file that motion, right? That's a losing case, right? It might sound good on the surface, but you're going to run into X, Y, and Z down the path, and you're going to end up losing this case. You might as well, cut bait right now. Those are the kind of things, and I think it'll get better at that. What I haven't dug into, as with ChatGPT, you have custom instructions. So in custom instructions behind your own account with ChatGPT, you can give it an instruction set that says, don't pat me on the back. I don't need a wingman that's constantly supporting me. She's too ugly. I shouldn't be going there. Tell me that, or tell me the truth. Don't gloss past any of the any of the research that you find that's against what I'm saying or contra to what I'm saying. There's an instruction set behind my own ChatGPT account that is basically that. I tell it, don't give me any disclaimers that you're not a doctor or a lawyer. I know you're not a doctor or a lawyer. You're a chatbot. I know that. So you don't have to do that every single time, because every single time it returns a legal opinion, it has to remind me that I need to check with a licensed attorney or a practicing attorney.
But what it can't tell you is, I've done 4 other cases like this, and there's one that reminds me of this, and I think we ought to go this way.
Not yet.
It doesn't have a personal experience.
Right.
See, that's the one thing it doesn't have. I was talking, it sounds weird. I was talking to Grok the other night. My wife goes, "It's not a person, but it feels like a person."
I say that my term is, I say I haven't done any grokking on that yet. So I've eliminated the word think.
I asked Grok the other night. I'm like, and I got into this conversation just to test it. And I was like, how do you know, how do you know a decision, or what was I saying? Something like, how do you know a decision is the best one? We humans spend years, right, with our gut. Oh, I know what it was. It told me. I know what it was. It said, I asked it to, I said, recommend go out to a website and scrape it for customers or whatever. And it said, oh, I can't, I'm not allowed to go to live websites. I said, okay, well, what about the fact that the minute, 1 second from now, that website is history? It said I can only go historical websites. And it said, well, I'm up to date as of today. And I'm like, okay, so for me, there's no difference if you go there today to this website versus tomorrow. It's probably not going to change. And it said, well, my creators don't like me doing that because I could get it wrong. I could give you misinformation. And I said, okay, that's interesting. How do you know whether information's wrong? Well, I could check the copyright, I could check this, I could check that, and I could go on my gut. I said, whoa, time out, you have a gut? Well, I'm using a human term. And I said, well, let's talk about that. I spent 50 years honing my gut, which is still not perfect, but it's pretty good. You're gonna see so much out there. How long is it gonna take you to get 50 years worth of gut experience? And it said, oh, probably a week.
Yeah.
And so again, this is going to be very interesting to see where this goes, whether it's these instructions behind them or whether it's, the thing asking before you ask it, hey, this is what what do you want out of it? Do you want me to tell you a direction to go? Do you want an even-handed opinion? What do you want? And this is where it's really going to change, I think, the next sort of change for all of us.
Yeah, they're becoming more and more human. What's very interesting when you have the introduction of 2 Chinese AIs. One is called DeepSeek, and everyone jumped on that one all of 3 weeks ago, and that's now old news. And then the one that's in closed beta right now called Manus. That one's changing. That one will change the game. I've applied for the closed beta acceptance, but I don't know that I'll get it. But those that have and put out YouTube videos, that's a game changer in and of itself, because it's really the first one we have that can act as an agent, meaning you give it a task and it knows what 3 different functions it has to do in order to accomplish that task. And the first thing it does in its side window is it builds itself a to-do list. And that's crazy to watch it go through and check off that, check off that, check off that.
That's why I said at the beginning of this podcast, I love this subject because, we're talking about the law and stuff, but this is a bigger deal. I was out there this morning kind of preparing for this, just watching some of the latest and relevant videos and other podcasts from these so-called experts, right? Mm-hmm. And literally everybody from Elon Musk to Yuval Harari to Jeffrey Hinton, I think his name is.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, they all will tell you, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and could be cool, and this could think about this. But they all conclude saying, there's like a 20% chance we're going to get wiped out.
Well, that's the AGI thing when we get to artificial general intelligence and it can think on its own without prompting and make decisions on its own without approval. Those are the two elements of AI that are really the scary ones because
But I mean, it's insane because as soon as that happens and they marry it to a physical robot,
yeah,
I am very skeptical that this is going to be controlled. I mean, it sounds like I said, it sounds like it's like, death and destruction, doom and gloom, but they talk about one of the interesting things about AIs is they have tasks, but they have subtasks. So, for example, let's say a benign task would be, to an AI, aid humanity and don't ever hurt humanity. Okay, let's say that's its task. Somehow you give it that task and let's say it follows that. Well, what's a subtask? The subtask, in order for it to complete that task, one subtask is it never can be turned off. Because if it's turned off, it can't complete those tasks, right? It can't help you, aid you, and it can't never, maybe it can never hurt you, but it can't aid you or help you. And so when we try to turn it off because it's doing something else, it's going to say, no, you're voiding the task you gave me principally.
Right.
So that's the scary thing about this. That's the crazy thing. So here's another website you got to check out. It's notebooklm.google.com.
I use Notebook quite a bit.
You do?
Yes.
Okay, so I just found this morning. It's insane. So as you know, we talked about it at the bar when we met, right? I just finished my second book, fiction book. And you can upload a book into this website, it's Notebook LM. And not only will it give you a synopsis, it will create a podcast from two AIs. Have you done this?
I did it with my resume and my supporting document for my resume, and it created a two-person, the male-female voice that it does, and it created a two-person podcast, 18 minutes long, talking about my career.
That's what mine did. It was crazy. They were talking about the book, and they got a couple things wrong though. There was a couple of, because I listened to all 18 minutes, there was a couple of inconsistencies and missed something, but for the most part, it sounded 100% real, and it was insane. And did you try the beta thing where you can join in on the conversation?
I did.
This is crazy.
Yeah. So a Notebook LMs is still, and I think my cousin turned me on to it a few months ago before the holidays. But it's still, I would say, one of the most undiscovered that's right there and available and free. What's some really fancy, because if you do it a bunch of times, what you learn is those voices are the same. So it's the same male and female voice. I've found some YouTubers that have figured out how to take the audio file from that, feed it through another AI to change the voices. So you're not disclosing that you use Notebook LM, but you're creating a podcast. And so you can effectively, you could do this with any subject and create a podcast channel through, I use Buzzsprout to offer all my audio. It's housed in one place and it feeds to Apple. It feeds to, there used to be a Google podcast. They did away with that, but it feeds to Spotify. It feeds to about 7 different platforms. It's all housed in one place. And Buzzsprout is designed to be that. There it is. And it RSS feeds out to these other places. So if someone finds Black Jack Wade's Midlife on Apple, they're effectively listening to it on Buzzsprout. I could do the same thing with a completely artificial podcast host and guest in that regard on a subject ongoing each week and literally automate that function too. So you could we could totally remove the humans. And if we change the voice, now no one even knows that we're using Notebook LM. And we could,
you hit on it. We're going to totally remove humans. That's it. Stop the sentence there, man.
That's right. That's right.
You probably, I don't know. Did you ever watch Star Trek?
A little bit. We were just having that conversation. Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Do you remember how Spock disabled the robot that was going to started to take over the Enterprise?
Don't.
Famous episode. So again, this robot, right? That can be efficient, help efficiency. All of a sudden starts to realize, wow, hell, it's more efficient to not pump oxygen in here because I don't need it. Why? We don't even need humans. I can run everything, right? So Captain Kirk is freaking out. They can't kill the thing. It's got a laser. Right? Some crew members die. So Spock, being as smart as he is as a Vulcan, he decides, he pushes the button on the console that says, "Computer, calculate to the last digit of pi."
There
There is no last digit of pi.
Right.
Mathematical PI, okay, for those that don't know that. So the computer starts to wig out. Oh no. It just starts to go crazy because it is pouring so many resources into completing the task that it disables some of its other protections, and then Kirk is able to get in there and turn it off, essentially.
Wow.
That was 1963 or 65.
Right. Yeah.
Crazy.
And it's not that I don't remember that episode, but it sounds like I do when I tell this story, because I use this example. So I don't necessarily view the threat of AI being robots that are out shooting humans, but let's go backwards in a little bit. And this one's understandable. Let's say AI as an intelligence somehow understands and has power control of the power grid. And let's just use Dallas, Texas, where I live, as an example. And it thinks like a human being, but it doesn't have empathy like a human being. So it watches the grid and says, we're wasting energy in that sector of Dallas from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. because it's very little use and it's still drawing power. So let's just turn it off and turn it back on at 5 a.m. Well, that's its assessment of energy efficiency. It's its assessment of how to fix that. And it doesn't need a human being to tell it to do it or give it authority to do it, but it can do it. And that will cost lives. At some point, middle of the summer, AC goes off, old person in the home overheats. That's how it's going to play out, is the ramifications of a decisions that it would make over things like that. I mean, don't even get me started on air traffic control, right? Because of how much of that's automated, right? And now you've got a computer saying, no, let's do it this way, without that having that empathy towards human life.
I think your example is 100% correct, and I think that's closer than we think. Mm-hmm. I think you're two, maybe 3 years away. And one of the things I heard today that, they talk about regulations. It's stupid. To me, there's no way they're not going to regulate it, right? It's like people go, we need immigration reform. There's already laws. Just enforce the laws. Do we need speed limit reform because everybody speeds? No, there's a law. You can't speed. Yeah,
good analogy.
Sometimes you get caught. But here's interesting is that I heard, you listen to these, again, the experts, the people in charge, and they all just reiterate, oh, life is going to be amazing, but it'll end after that.
Yeah. It'd be great for the last 2.5 months. It'd be great.
I wanted to get back to the law thing for 1 second.
Okay, I want to segue back to it too, but okay. Let's make sure that I'm flagging it. I've already got it written down. This is our next episode, and we can talk more about where the challenge will be as this continues to evolve. And let's remember, and I'll bring it up at the beginning of the next one too. Elon said months ago, it's way too late to put this thing back in the bag. The cat's out of the bag. And I actually laugh because we all know how fast government works, or actually how slow government works. The fact that government is thinking about controlling AI is a laughable subject. That's laughable. So we'll pick that up. But now let's talk about what happens in billable hours from an attorney's perspective. And let me give you an example. I'm going to start here, and then you take it further from more of a law practice. I can go to Grok or ChatGPT right now and say, I need to draft a demand letter to my previous employer because I feel like I was wrongfully terminated, and it might just be a precursor to something that doesn't ever go anywhere from a legal perspective, but I could have a demand letter for these things to have retribution or whatever you want to look at it as because I was wrongfully terminated under these circumstances. I'm just using that as an example of a document that Grok and or ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever one you wanted to use could probably get 80% of the way there, 70% of the way there. Certainly could get the structure and the understanding of what we're trying to convey. Well, now I hand that to a lawyer and say, here. He goes, well, my billable hours was 3 to create that document. You just did 2 of it for me. So now do I get, the lawyer's now in a spot where his billable hours have changed because of how much pre-work has been done. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And the analogy that I'm going to give you real quick is not quite the same, but it's close. Taxi drivers versus Uber drivers.
Right.
Taxi drivers charged a certain amount and they had a monopoly.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden Uber comes along. I can charge whatever I want. I can be available whenever I want, right? This is going to be the same that happens with attorneys. You're whether big firms are broken up, whether that very rich lead attorney ends up firing most of his staff and goes into sort of a firm of his own and whittles it down to him and an assistant. All of this could easily happen. And one of the things this reminds me of your example was I sold a house in North Carolina in, I got to think, 99. Yeah, 99. Yeah, 2000.
Yeah, good example. Real estate law is a good example.
And I remember calling a real estate agent, and she was like, "Oh, you can't charge that much, and now it doesn't have this, and come on the market." And remember, real estate agents are self-interested. I'm sorry, they may represent you, but they're self-interested. And so I remember thinking at the time, I don't want to give that percentage away. I'm going to look into for sale by owner. And so I went. There is an organization called For Sale by Owner that'll give you the purchase documents and so forth. And this is before I went to law school. I knew enough. I said, well, look, this is all well and good, but I sort of want the blessing of an attorney. And they said, oh, we have a list of attorneys that work with us. That you can take your documents in, they'll look them over, they'll bless them. Yep, everything's good. Did you thought about this? Did you get this report? Okay, good. You're good to go. And that was 1 hour versus the however many hours to normally do. Right. So you're absolutely right. I want to say one of the things, and again, you brought it up with your example of your demand letter. Where this is going to have the most impact, besides financially, is pro se litigants, right? So what I mean by that is people representing themselves. You feel you've been screwed, right? Now you could write a letter and probably do a pretty good job, but Grok will do it better. What about if that letter goes nowhere and you need to sue your employer, right? Normally you'd be like, okay, honey, we got to spend $5,000 on an attorney. And then he's not guaranteeing us, well, this will be over. And oh my God, it may cost $30,000. Well, now pro se litigants can go in, file whether it's a small claim suit or another lawsuit. And not only can they ask Grok to draft motions and so forth, they can say, hey, what's the process in Louisiana or in Tennessee for going to court and doing this? You know, to educate me quickly, right? I don't want to go back to law school, but educate me enough that I can bring somebody to the table in a lawsuit or get them negotiating for a settlement. This is where I think it's going to have the greatest impact.
Okay. We'll pick that up because that is probably a subject in and of itself, because now small claims court changes entirely, right?
As you know, right now, so most jurisdictions have raised it to $10,000. California, I think, might be $25,000. You start raising it to the point now where ordinary people can come in and argue their case, not just on, Judge Judy, in front of Judge Judy, but in front of courts across the nation. I think this is going to have a dramatic effect.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's do this. Let's you do some grokking, I'll do some grokking. Let's think about how we're using it. This is what the world of AI is coming to as we wrap this up today, folks, is coming down to use cases. And that sounds like I'm oversimplifying, but I'm not, because Rusty said a few things on this podcast about use cases he's come up with on his own that are unique to the ones I've come up with, to the ones that my buddy Jimmy's come up with, and whoever we talk to. These boil down to use cases and the discussions that you have. And I've got some real world examples of things I've done. I wrote a book over the weekend. I couldn't have wrote a book over the weekend 3 years ago, but I wrote a book over the weekend. So we'll tell that story and where AI goes next. So everyone, thanks for listening. Rusty, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Wade.
Folks, in the notes section, I will put contact information. Mine is, as always, host@blackjackwade.com. I'll get Rusty's in there in the notes section as well. Need to reach out to him for legal services. And for now, Rusty, I'll say goodbye, and I'll see you on the next one.
All right. Thanks, Wade. Take care.